navigation system for the craft. It was a consciousness-assisted navigation system. This is consciousness technology. So you think about where you might want to go in space and ultimately in time. And then the hologram will show you that approximate location. If you decide, yes, that's where I want to go, you will the ship to fly to that location. The ship has a system which, as it turns out, is based in the seat. All you need is the seat from the UFO. This is the Montauk Project, which we're going to talk about later, and my whistleblower. I'm going to give you his real name for the first time and all the stuff that he didn't want me to tell you about himself until he had died. That's part of why I'm doing this, okay? And you're going to see his picture, and this is a world exclusive. Anyway, what he said was that a portal will open up in front of the ship as you think about where you want to go, and then you fly through the portal and you arrive where you need to go. So the cube was some type of navigation system that allowed you to visualize where you want to go, and then you make the decision and you make the trip. But the cube apparently could be brought out, and it's not like they had wires. I mean, come on, it's wireless. So it's sitting there on the dashboard. You think about where you want to go, and whoop, there you go. So fascinating beyond belief, because they discovered very quickly that they could think about the future and they could see the future with the what they called the Orion Cube, or it was also called the Roswell Cube, but mostly it was called the Orion Cube. So when you thought about the future, you would see a potential future, but it was a particular part of reality that may or may not actually happen depending upon the choices that we make now. In other words, nobody really can fully predict the future. You can only look at probable windows of time and look at what is the strongest timeline that magnetizes the most amount of probability that that's going to happen. Now, many of the insiders who I've spoken to throughout my career, several of whom did not talk to anyone else in the entire UFO community, frankly, because they didn't trust them. They only trusted me because I didn't betray anyone. I heard multiple insiders talk to me about layered time. And this is how they try to conceptualize this, that there's these different layers of time that are stacked on top of each other, and they're all existing in simultaneity. They're all there in some parallel universe, some parallel reality. And the choices that we make moment by moment determine which timeline we magnetize. And that's really, really trippy and really, really cool. So they were able to use this Orion Cube to look into the future and to see probable windows of time. And there are other systems like Project Looking Glass that actually do the same thing, in which Project Looking Glass, and I'm sure I have slides for this, it's modeled off of the pineal gland. I've said this many times, so again, I won't repeat myself. You can go back and watch previous videos on this channel. I did cover it in one of the big 5-hour ones that I did here a few months back in April, I believe, where the pineal gland is just a hollow area in the geographic, if you will, or the geometric center of your brain. It's right in the middle. It has more blood flow going through it than any other part of the body, and all that's inside is floating water with little crystals in it. And there's very strong evidence from guys like Dr. Rick Strassman that some of those crystals are dimethyltryptamine or DMT. So one of the things that I got really excited about was that the man who had made more synthetic DMT than anyone else in the world would dry it out into a dish, and he'd hit it with a hammer, and big flashes of color would come out, colored light from the DMT. And it could change. You could hit it with a hammer once and you get blue light. You hit it with a hammer again, you get red light. You hit it with a hammer again, you get yellow light, and on and on and on. Well, there's a very unique name for that in science. It's called piezochromatism, in which you have a compression of a crystal, which then releases light in the form of photons, which in this case can be apparently any color in the rainbow spectrum. And it varies just, I guess, if you really got technical, it would have to do with how you hit it with a hammer and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, what does this mean? This means that apparently the pineal gland is using this somehow. It's using the piezochromatic properties of DMT, which your body naturally has. So what can happen for you is that you can be meditating, and the big secret is, and I talked about this in my first book, Source Field Investigations, or in Britain it's called Hidden Science of Lost Civilizations. The interior of the pineal gland, the whole interior of it, is coated with these little cells called pinealocytes that are identical, basically identical to the rods and cones in the retina of your eye. What in the world are rods and cones doing inside your pineal gland? And best of all, there's a brain circuit that they found that goes straight from that pineal gland to the visual cortex in the brain, exactly the same as the one that comes out of your eyes. So it is a third eye. It does have retinal tissue, and it does have crystals inside that at least theoretically can release colored light and send it through into the visual cortex. Now, one of the other insiders I'm going to be talking about today, the late Dr. Pete Peterson, actually described work that he did in secret government programs where with people who are alive, they drilled a little hole in your head and they sent a fiber optic cable inside your pineal gland, and apparently they were able to see the full color visual images coming through your pineal gland before they got captured by the rods and cones and before they got descrambled to whatever efficacy by your visual cortex. You have to close your eyes, you have to meditate, and you start getting these fleeting visual images. Usually when you get something through your pineal gland, it's a snapshot. It takes a lot of training and a lot of discipline to slow that down so that it's not just a split second. And you can see it for a longer period of time. If you meditate enough and you practice enough, you can get to that, okay? But the really cool benefit of Project Looking Glass is that you can see what's inside somebody else's pineal gland because there is some sort of quantum correlation that takes place between the activity in your pineal gland and the activity in the machine. And of course, again, this is an extraterrestrial, highly advanced technology. As Arthur C. Clarke once said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So if you had time travelers going back into the past and they had a little screen that they were using, somebody might call that a magic mirror because they don't know what the heck an iPhone is. They don't know how you showed them that video, whatever. So, and time travel does appear to be happening. And we've gotten some really, really compelling new briefings on this, which is why that's what I titled this talk. So let's go tight again here. When we look at all the evidence, when we put all the pieces together, the reason why Looking Glass worked is that they had this barrel that was in the same shape as the pineal gland, and inside the barrel was water like they had in the pineal gland. The other thing that I heard, which is sad really, is that the other ingredient to make Looking Glass work is ground up dust. Get a load of this now. You can laugh. I'm giving you permission to laugh, okay? Because that's how you got to access new information if you haven't heard me say this before. Ground up dust from extraterrestrial mummies. Because apparently extraterrestrial physiology, extraterrestrial DNA, extraterrestrial genetics allows for a much higher degree of psychic energy throughput, if you will. It's like the difference between a dial-up modem versus insane fast broadband. So apparently, if you grind up the dust of one of these extraterrestrial mummies, the sheer energetic power of that DNA is what makes this technology work. So they duplicate the conditions in the pineal gland, because the other thing I didn't say is the way the pineal gland works, and this is what Dr. Pete Peterson was studying, is that you get these electromagnetic effects. It's like this whirling, all this stuff. Like if my head's a pineal gland right now, let's say, there's all these electromagnetic fields going around different directions, and they get faster and faster. And you can actually feel that when you're meditating. It's like a vibrational rush. And you just feel this, whoa, you know, it's like your skin starts tingling. Sometimes you feel a pressure in your head. That's when your pineal gland is firing up. like you got that snowblower or the lawnmower. You finally pull on, it gets going. As that stuff spins around, what is it doing? It's creating a Faraday cage. It's creating electromagnetic shielding so that there's no electromagnetic energy, no radio frequencies, no TV, no cell frequencies, nothing getting inside your pineal gland. At that point, when it's electromagnetically shielded, the DMT apparently kicks in, and it allows you to start accessing these realms of consciousness, and it goes outside of linear time. So the way that they duplicated this, whoever invented this, apparently it was from an ancient civilization dating back at least 12,000 years ago. That was their conclusion. The dreaded A word, Atlantis, right? This technology would somehow create a quantum coupling, a quantum correlation with whoever is standing in front of the machine. So nobody could get too close. Only the guy that's going to run the thing. And you got to be a good meditator. So then when you try to think about what areas in the future you want to look at, it's all visible on this display because the machine has these rings that spin around the barrel. There's 3 rings. They spin around the barrel. They create that electromagnetic shielding, and then it's all encased inside a bubble that's filled with argon gas. And argon, there's some very interesting things related to argon. When you get into the work of Dr. Kenneth Shoulders and his amazing charge cluster technology, which is probably, it's one of the main contenders of what we're going to use to build hover cars. Because you can create anti-gravity with these little things. It turns out that if you send electrical current, sorry I'm jumping around a little bit, but hang in with me. If you send electrical current down a needle, and it comes off the point of the needle, you get this little ball of energy. And the ball of energy has all these very strange properties that shouldn't happen. It has way more electrostatic charge than it normally would. So it's got much, much greater energy in a much smaller package than it normally would, and it repels gravity. Plus, if you generate these charge clusters and you pass them through radioactive material, you deradiate the material. So when we start using charge cluster technology, we get free energy, because these things, if you generate a whole bunch of them, you get a lot of free energy out of it, more than it seems to take to generate, which is really true. That's just the nature of how charge clusters form. They attract more energy than it takes to make them. And then they emanate that energy. So they generate energy, they generate a gravitational pull that you can either push or pull with it. And they also are, again, deradiating radioactive material when you pass it through the material. So as I've talked about in other videos, I'm not going to run through all of it again. There have been these declassified patents filed by a man apparently named Salvatore Pais, and they are for a device called the HAUC, H-A-U-C, Hybrid Air Underwater Craft. And it's basically a flying black triangle, and the patent describes exactly how to build it and says that it is anti-gravitic. And in the other videos I've done, we have compelling evidence that they've already built these, they know how they work. And Salvatore Pais also patented a compact fusion reactor that's all these little needles that whirl around, which is how you make charge clusters, okay? And that is a power system you could drop in the thing. The other thing I talked about before is that the HAUC craft is like a peanut. So there's a nut inside and then a shell on the outside, and that hollow area between the interior hull and the exterior hull, there's all these little needles where they can generate the charge clusters. So you generate them and then you steer them, and by first generating them, you then point them where you want to go, and that's how you get anti-gravity. So because I am working on hover car technology right now, I'm not joking. I'm not going to talk about it until we've got something for you, but we're getting pretty close. Once we get to that point, I can talk a lot more, but several of Pete Peterson's former associates I'm working with on this, and it's very, very real. We expect that once we get financed, hopefully, that we'll have an operational working prototype within 1 year, and that we could go into mass production within 4 years, where you will have a hover car in your garage at an affordable price. One of the designs that we have, I have schematics of it, the wings fold up like this so you can get it into the garage, because you do actually need some wings for like these ionic type of propulsion systems. You're shooting an ion cannon out the back. You have the anti-gravity, but you need thrust. So the wings kind of allow you to be what they call a flux liner. You're riding the gravitational flux instead of an airliner that uses air. And because it's hybrid air underwater craft, you can also fly underwater with these at a much, much greater rate of speed than would normally be possible with that kind of a system. So I'm very, very excited about the technology that we're going to have. And again, it's been handed to us. The military is handed to us. And as I've said before, Salvatore Pius translates as Savior of our nation. Salvatore, Savior. Pius, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'm sorry, I'm probably mangling it. Pius means nation or country. So why would the military save our country by releasing these patents? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. We've talked about Space Force. I've done a lot of other videos suggesting that this forbidden technology is going to be part of what we're going to get, and the company that I'm working with is one of about 5 that I've been briefed on that are all working on this, and we're all in kind of like a little race with each other of who's going to do it first. Now, one of those companies that may or may not be in the 5, of course, is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The former lead guitarist and lead singer of Blink-182, Tom DeLonge, kind of face-planted when he went on Joe Rogan, and he was all twitchy and funny when he was talking. And I don't really mean any harm to this guy. It's just like, you know, if everybody comes to you and they hand all this stuff to you on a silver platter, it's probably not true. All my insiders were hard-earned over many, many years. I reached out to him through a mutual associate. He never contacted me, and I did offer him this company before I got involved in the company I'm talking about that I'm now a part of. I tried to give it to Tom DeLonge. I gave him the contact info, I told him what it was, and he had the option to get involved, and he never called them. So before I took a crack at this myself, I said, well, if Tom DeLonge is out there saying that they want to get anti-gravity going, I don't really care how it gets done. Let's just get it done. I mean, I do care to a degree, but like ultimately, you know, as Pete Peterson used to say, don't count your chickens until you're wiping grease off of your lips. You're not really going to get anything out of this. You're not really going to get anything out of having this technology, and then nobody develops it. So if Tom DeLonge was developing it, yeah, here it is. I gave it to him. He didn't take it, okay? Tom DeLonge sat down with William Tompkins, and he walked out on him in the middle of the meeting. This amazing 93-year-old World War II vet who has a stunning disclosure story. Tom DeLonge got up and walked out on him. That's a fact, okay? And Tom DeLonge, for whatever reason, has many, many different images of Masonic symbols on all of his gear, his guitars, his amps, his straps, his clothes, you know. So that's not necessarily bad, but like when you start to think about the fact that you have to contain an oath of secrecy here, and it just really disturbed people when Tom went on Joe Rogan and he wouldn't talk about this and he wouldn't talk about that, and he's very cagey, and he's all twitchy and stuff. Ever since that happened, they never brought him out as a public figure except in very scripted, pre-taped segments. He never did anything live again, and they switched to Luis Elizondo. Luis Elizondo is now the face of this. And again, I don't have any intrinsic problem with what they're doing. But if this is not the full story, or if they're going to try to spin it to say that all extraterrestrials are evil and threats, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, then yeah, we have a problem. Because the UFO field is so vast. I mean, I've been doing this for so long. There's so many pieces of information I can whip out of my hat and tell a completely different story of how to paint the picture. You know, it's like all these colors I have to play with of what kind of art I want to make when talking about UFOs, because there's so much data. It's just staggering. So anyway, let's go back to the slide again. These, as I said, 2020 has been the biggest mass consciousness event of all time, and these mass consciousness events are leading to the awakening of our collective mind, as I was saying, and you can see that with things like the meditation effect. So if the meditation effect is happening now, and we can start to create that goodwill, then we can steer this thing. We don't have to be feeling powerless against violence. And again, I don't recommend getting all churchy and thinking that you have to do a mass meditation. The real secret is for you to maintain that positivity, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, whatever's going on in your life. Just keep that positive focus. Stay grounded, stay peaceful all the time. And I understand that it's never been more difficult to do that than it is now. But it's never been more important for you to do that than it is now. So again, let's go back to the slide. As I was saying before, and shameless plug of my book title, we are now awakening in the dream that we were once so convinced was reality. The real world is much different than what we are being presented with in the media right now. That's obvious. We've already been talking about that. The truth is being suppressed, censored on an epic scale, and it's a very difficult thing to process. I've talked about the idea that ETs are not all evil. They are the root of all major world religions, world traditions. They're out there, folks. They've been doing this for a long time. They are protecting us. That's why they haven't let us have a nuclear war. It seems very disingenuous for me, for Luis Elizondo to try to say that this is a dangerous thing, that this is a bad thing. And I understand if you're in the military, you got to see everything as a threat. It's your job, right? If somebody's powering down this installation, yeah, we got to look at this as a very credible threat. And they also recently, another article that they came out with was saying, oh my God, in one incident, somebody was trying to go after a UFO and his radar got scrambled. That's an act of hostility. Did the craft engage? Meaning, did they power up weapons and did they fire? No. There was no engagement. And again, it seems very disingenuous, very kind of ridiculous and silly to try to make people afraid, as if we don't have enough to be afraid of already. Now they want us to be afraid of evil aliens, and that everything is evil. Everything extraterrestrial oriented is bad, and oh my God, we're scared now, and you should be scared too, everybody, because if you don't already have enough stuff to be scared about, you need to be scared about this too. Let me really zoom in on the I'm not buying it. Why? Because why are you guys cherry picking a tiny little subset of the data of UFOs, which is so huge? You cherry pick a little bit and you look for the most negative stuff you can find, and then you amplify it. Ah! Your hair's on fire like Beaker. Oh my God. Come on, man. I mean, that's the Muppet Show. It's it dates my age, but Beaker, They used to call me Beaker because at one point I shaved the sides of my head in college and only had hair on the top, which was an accident. I was trying to cut my own hair. I did that here in Colorado recently. I think it looks pretty good. But at the time, I was grabbing chunks of hair on the back of my head and cutting it with the scissors like this. And I had these bald patches. And this woman who was across the way from me, Dina, said, sorry, the only way we're going to save your hair is to shave off the sides and the back. And it ended up being the same haircut that she had. So for a while, I had this funky haircut, and I got a lot of heckling and a lot of hate. So all you haters out there, I got 45 years of tolerating this stuff. No big deal. Anyway, I don't know how the hell I got off on that. But the reality is, again, benevolent ETs actually do exist. This is a basic fact. It's a basic scientific fact that we're going to learn about at some point, probably pretty soon, because the Partial Disclosure Initiative will be thrown off by the DOD. They're not going to let this happen. We are going to get disclosure that's a lot bigger than we think we're going to get. And it's coming fast. And again, you're going to get toys that you can play with. So these benevolent ETs live outside of time. And this is another very, very intriguing fact that we get into when we start to study this stuff, that all anti-gravity must be time travel. And I talk about the science of this in my first book. As soon as you shield off an area from its normal electrogravitational flux, because electricity and gravity are paired. This is another crazy thing. There's a lot of Russian science about this. There's a guy named Terletsky, and he has this science of quadrigays. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's Quadriges. The Terletsky quadrigays basically say, You know, quadrigaze, I mean, it sounds like a joke, right? It's like, was it in the bathhouse? Is it a sauna? How many? There's 4 of them? You know, rub-a-dub-dub, 4 minutes. I'm not even going to go there, okay? Jesus. Why do I do that to myself? You know, I take that back. Just when we go back, we'll edit that part out. No, we can't do that. It's live. The quadrigaze. Yes. That's the name of our next band, okay? When you and I start a band, we're going to call it the quadrigaze. But nothing gay is going to happen. It's only a title. Anyway, wow, I got to stop. So much you can do with that kind of stuff. And I love comedy. So what did Terlecki basically discover? And this gets into heavy-duty Russian physics, but just hang in there. What he found out was that there's these natural things all throughout the world. And like, for example, the charge cluster is just a very tiny one. And remember I said the charge cluster is where you're shooting electrical current down a very sharp needle. It pops off the end of the tip, and it rolls into a ball, and now it's got all this energy, and it's anti-gravitic, and it also will deradiate radioactive material. But there's larger forms of this that are called ball lightning. It also shows up in the form of a tornado. A tornado would be a very large vortex like this. There's orbs and even poltergeists. Apparently, many poltergeist phenomena are these same kind of orbs. So what is happening is that gravity is flowing into this area of space, and inside the area, inside the sphere, gravity is turning into electromagnetic energy. And electromagnetic energy is turning into gravity. So the gravitational well that's forming this thing creates electromagnetism. And what is light? Light is electromagnetic energy. So it glows. A lot of these balls end up glowing. The charge clusters glow. So basically what you have here is that if you can create a charge cluster, if you can create one of these orbs, and some people have had amazing photographs where these crazy things show up on the picture that weren't there originally. Some of that is dust on the lens, and some of it is definitely not. I've seen some really, really amazing orb photos that are definitely not dust. Some people have showed me. So anyway, we can create these little guys with our minds. And so if you can create enough of them with your mind, you could levitate yourself, or you could levitate any other object. Nina Kalagina, the infamous Russian telekinetic psychic, would hold her hands together. If you've seen the film, and she can make a little salt shaker move, and they got little matches on the ground. She's moving it along, and she's definitely not touching it. And the other thing that, there was another one named Alla Vinogradova who also could do this. And they actually found that when you measured the electromagnetic energy around the object that she was moving, it had perturbations and fluctuations that were the same as her brain waves and her heart rate and her respiratory rate. Just like I was saying about how somebody next door to you is going to be able to entrain with your energy so that if you're thinking positive thoughts, they will as well, right? When these women were actually moving things with their mind, the energy around the object matched all their vital signs. Again, because this energy is alive. And so they're creating gravitational thrust. They're creating movement with their consciousness. One of the things Pete Peterson was involved in was dealing with what they called warm formers. And warm formers were people who they would find, various defense contractors would find people, they would do these spoon bending parties, and they'd get people to hold the spoon. And, it's kind of silly, but he'd say you have to make love to the spoon with your mind. You want to feel a lust for that metal bending. And you just say, bend, 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 bend. And you just, but it's more of this like, you have to use the orgasmic energy, apparently. There's something about the orgasmic energy. And people would see the spoon, the bowl just goes, ooh, and just falls down. Nobody's touching it. Tines of a fork that just go down one by one like this, like they're melting. So they would find people that could do this, and they'd bring them in, and then they'd have them do bars, and the bars would get thicker, up to like, an inch thick of steel, and people would bend the bars. And then they get you into this thing where they'd have several of the warm formers, and they'd all put their hands on like a piece of titanium, which is very notoriously difficult to mold things out of. Although we've solved that now with titanium diboride, which is a sprayable titanium foam that we're going to be using to make your hover car. But that's another story, okay? But anyway, back then they didn't have titanium diboride. They didn't have the foam. So what they would do is they would have everybody meditate on this thing and use their telekinesis. And then all of a sudden, when you're least expecting it, boom, this thing comes down. It's a die. and it pops this piece out that would be very, very difficult to make through normal milling and normal technology. And everybody gets scared when it happens and they take their hands off, but now they've got this piece, and it's much, much cheaper to have people warm form the titanium and have it form that way as opposed to trying to mill it and trying to grind it down. It's very, very difficult, much more expensive. So the warm formers were cheaper. This is the kind of stuff that you get when you hang out with me, okay? It gets really weird really fast. But again, if you can make charge clusters in your mind, if your pineal gland is actually also going to generate charge clusters, which I believe it does. Remember I said it fires up, right? There's this energy it gets all going really fast, and you can actually feel it when you're meditating. At that point, you might be able to start generating a small amount of usually invisible charge clusters that will come out of your hands, and you can move things with your mind. The best way to do this is you take a wine cork from a wine bottle, you stick a needle in it, and then you fold a square piece of paper about this big into a pyramid. So it's like a nice little pyramid, and you leave it on top of the needle, and you don't want to breathe on it, of course, you don't want to cheat, but you hold your hands out like this, and then you again, in your mind, you make love to the paper. It's that erotic energy that's very important to do this. It's the energy of life, it's the energy of vitality. And if you try this, you might actually be able to get the paper to move. It's cheap, and I did it back in the day, and I had some very stunning things happen. And then I got cocky, and I put it under a glass, took a mayonnaise jar that was empty, and I stuck it over the thing, and I was still able to get it to work sometimes. One time I remember I was doing it, I meditated for a really long time, and all of a sudden the paper went boop, and it just did like a 9-degree turn very suddenly, and then it immediately stopped. Now here's the funny thing too, if you're doing the paper pyramid experiments, okay, and a certain percentage of you will be able to do this easily because 1 out of 1,000 people is a telekinetic by nature, and if you try, it's not going to be that difficult. So there's probably more than 1,000 people watching, so some of you will be able to do this right away if you just try. The paper makes it very easy. There's other ways to do it too, like you can take a little piece of foil and put it on the surface of water, like a little foil thing like this. You can make that move. Another one I've heard about is a piece of silk that hangs down vertically in a square, and you hold your hand out like this, and you try to get the silk to make a bump so that it pushes out to the side when normally it wouldn't be able to. And you can hold that and get that to stay that way. Because of the energies that we're going through, I've talked a lot about this, more and more of us will be able to do these cool things. And I can honestly say that once you get that little paper pyramid to move, now you're in a different realm, because what will happen is you go, oh my God, it's moving, I'm so excited, and then it stops. You have to get to a point that you don't really care. You have to get to a point where it's not a big deal that this thing is moving. And you just kind of let it happen, let it move. And you'll eventually be able to train yourself so that you can keep it moving, and you're not going to get your ego in the way. So anyway, now we don't need to do that because of titanium diboride, which is a sprayable foam that's very lightweight. It has the hardness of titanium. And there's also a lot of cool 3D printing technology. There's a basalt composite that we're going to be using where it's extremely strong and it's just made out of stone. And it's also very, very, very lightweight. So there's lots of cool technology that's coming our way. So let's go back to the slides now. Oops, now that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so yeah, the benevolent ETs live outside of time. We were talking about that. And they've also generated ancient monuments and these ancient prophecies about the so-called ascension, which is one of my favorite topics of all. And we're not going to do all that again, because then somebody's going to be cranky pants and say, oh my God, David, you repeated some information. Sorry. Anyway, that's not really anything strange anymore. The Ancient Aliens show has now gone fully mainstream. It turns out that it's the most popular show on television in India and many of the countries in South America. And again, this is their metrics. It's not my information. That's just what we know. But as a result, people now realize, getting back to the slide once again, megalithic monuments cannot be duplicated. You can't make this out of conventional technology. The people in Japan tried to build the Great Pyramid at 1/5 of its size, using the best cranes, the best laser-controlled telemetry. It didn't work. It didn't work. The pyramid fell apart. Nothing that they could do could even begin to duplicate that thing. And maybe some point I'll whip out the pyramid data in a later video, because that stuff is really, really amazing too. Getting back to the slides again, another big part of all this is that millions of people have had abduction-type experiences. I talk about that greatly in my new book. There's a lot of new mysteries. Maybe I'll discuss those later on. I'm not going to do that right now. But I also, as I was turning around, looking at my stuff, I noticed, once again, when I was a kid, if you've never seen me describe this before, I had a strange dream where I was taken to this place that I called Planet Z, and I described that once I got there that I met with this intelligent being. A lot of times, apparently, abductions screen memories look like dreams, but it actually was some kind of contact, and under hypnosis you get more information. Well, notice that this has a curiously shaped head. This was before I'd ever seen a picture of a gray or had any idea what they would look like. I was very young when I did this. And notice also that he has these interesting vertical slit pupils. So, and then the part that you don't see is that I drew this mouth in the middle of his chest just because I kind of felt this being was terrifying and horrifying. So I drew this big mouth in the middle of his chest, like in the movie The Thing, when the guy's getting his heart jumped and all of a sudden his whole chest opens up and bites the guy's arms off. I had seen that as a kid. It traumatized me greatly. And so maybe for some reason that's why my intelligent being seems to have one finger in particular that he has raised in my illustration. I don't know if I consciously thought about that or not. But our little friend, Mr. Turtle here, he's kind of got the same idea. This is probably how a lot of nature is feeling about human beings on Earth right now. I had to throw that in there just to have some fun. But again, getting to the point of what we were talking about, the mainstream media is now fully acknowledging that UFOs exist. This is the New York Intelligencer, and you can see the date there is July 24th, 2020. So it's very recent, and it says, the headline is, the Pentagon has reportedly found off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. Well, holy smokes. I mean, this is really, really amazing because it's official. It's out there in the news. It's not a superstition anymore. It's not up to debate. They have said this, and they've said that they have multiple crashes that they retrieved. So when are you guys going to tell us about the Orion Cube? When are you guys going to tell us about the fact that both the good guys and the bad guys in our planetary secret game have been able to see the future, and so it's this constant game of cat and mouse of who gets to win the temporal war. Who can outthink the other one in the 3D chess game of time? Because each side can see what the other one is going to do. So that's part of what has made this whole thing that the Alliance is doing, that I've talked about in so many other videos, very difficult. This is not... It's a very difficult thing. There's apparently over 100,000 sealed indictments that are all going to be unsealed. Most of that will probably be after November or sometime maybe in the middle of November. We're going to get some of them before, I think. It's sure looking like it. And that's exciting too. But anyway, the Pentagon has officially said, yep, we found off-world vehicles not of this Earth, and we held on to them, and we got them. Whoa. Okay, so what now, you guys? Are you just going to expect us to be happy with that for a month and a half, 2 months, 3 months? When are you going to say anything else? Okay, so you have them. Let's see one. And they talk about in here that they have materials from the thing, and that the materials have been determined to be of non-earthly origin. They have unusual properties and all this stuff. So you'd think that this is a very sober, reassuring type of article, but then let's look at the picture that they paired up with it, okay? Check this out. So here's this woman wearing these sunglasses. I believe. And there's this creepy gray there in the background. And let's read a little bit from this, because this is pretty fascinating. Oops, I was going to take the quote, and that's right, I ran out of time. The other thing I ran out of time for was to talk about this, which is, if we go back here, there's George Norrie. Okay, somebody dressed up as George Norrie. It's absolutely hilarious. And so even when they're telling you the truth, they still have to embed it in a bullshit sandwich. I guess I shouldn't have said that either. I'm sorry, everybody. So this is the moment I've waited oh, I do have it. Okay, this is the moment I've waited my entire life for, or so I thought. But everything else is so depressing, it's like, really? Okay, so there she is up close, and here's George. Okay, so there's the analog, and then here is the real thing. See the magic of technology, how I can do that? And then what's up with the hand? I think that I think this person had an alien hand with 3 fingers, if you look at the hand carefully. So George Norrie has a dark and disturbing secret in this character that this person created. All right, so now we're really going to get into the good stuff here. I don't want to take too much more of your time because 7 to 8, 8 to 9, it's already 9:13 on the East Coast, and I don't want to keep you up all night. So my first high-level insider, who I actually got personal access to, was Daniel. And Daniel, actually, I began talking about him and his work in roughly 2000, I guess, 4 or 5. But there's a lot of things that you don't know. And so I'm going to kind of unveil some of this for you because very tragically and unfortunately, Daniel died this year. And he died around, I guess it was February 4th or somewhere right around that time, early February. I did get a chance to interview him here in this room, but it was by telephone. I had to hold up my cell phone to the microphone. I was looking at the levels to make sure that they were good. And he basically spilled the whole story, and he was amazingly verbally articulate. He was on a lot of medication because he was dying from cancer, so his voice slurs a little. But even so, he's amazingly articulate, spoke very, very quickly. Now, I'm going to tell you more about him because, as it turns out, this is who he really is, okay? Oops. That's me. I'm not Daniel, okay? How do I do this? Okay, let's see. Yep, I got to hit that button. His real name is Dr. Bruce Perrett. And here he is later in his life when he was working as a security guard. Now, he had never, ever allowed me to take a picture of him. And so I don't have any pictures of him. And in all of the internet, there's only 2 other pictures of him in existence, and they're both really bad if you want to see his eyes, okay? But it's all we got. So this is the first picture of Bruce, and this comes off of a particular website dedicated to something, this physics he was working on called the reciprocal system. And here's another picture of Bruce where you can kind of see him smiling more. So this insider claimed that he was working on the Phoenix 3 project from 1981 to 1983. Now, what is that? The Phoenix 3 project is what most people call Montauk. So Montauk is allegedly a program in which a seat out of a UFO from one of these crash retrievals that, by the way, now they've officially acknowledged they have them, folks, okay? So this stuff is starting to sound less crazy because they've already told you that there's a UFO that they got. There's multiple UFOs they got, probably different makes and models from different people, different places, right? Different technology. Wouldn't you expect that if it has anti-gravity, that there's all kinds of cool technology in there that we don't know about right now? And if it is true that by shielding gravity that you shield time and you have a time machine, by definition, an anti-gravity machine is a time machine. Apparently, when you shield off your gravity, this is the big, big secret that everybody knows in the inside world. When you shield off your gravity, you also shield off the flow of time. And now, time doesn't move for you in that local area. Now, Einstein would have disagreed with that. Einstein would say that time is locally invariant. That's the technical physics term for it. But local invariance is wrong. Now, Einstein also kind of got around it by invoking something called frame dragging, where like the space-time fabric, as he calls it, is traveling along with you as you move through space. And so as you move through space, you're also moving through time. This is why Einstein would say that as you go towards light speed, that you're also slowing down time so that if you went back to where you came from after taking a light speed journey, It's the future, like way in the future, and everybody you knew and loved is gone. So there was a whole, there's been a whole dialogue about that, but it's as if you could only go forward in time. That's not really actually true. If you shield gravity, you can either go forward or backward in time just by traveling in a direction. And it has to do with if you travel ahead of where the Earth was when you left, you go into the future, and if you travel behind where the Earth was when you left, you go into the past. See, the Earth is revolving in a certain direction. If you travel ahead of that revolution and then you come back down, you arrive in the future. If you travel behind that revolution and you come back down, you arrive in the past. Another thing they apparently found as they got into this anti-gravity and they studied these machines is that there are these eddy currents in the flow of gravity that represent essentially different dimensions. In other words, dimensionalities are enfolded in the gravitational field. Higher dimensions, other dimensions, are inside gravity. And some of these dimensions actually have time flowing backwards. So you can change the vibratory rate of the anti-gravity that you're producing, and you can get into these different zones where you can go into different parts of time. Okay? I'm going to have a lot more to talk about this. But what Daniel revealed was that the first 2 books written by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon, called the Montauk Project, are 100% true. And the reason is that he actually worked for Preston Nichols at this Brookhaven National Labs in Long Island. Now the official Brookhaven location on the map is west of Montauk Point, but of course they have an underground tunnel system, and apparently the way they paid for this program was with German gold after World War II that they smuggled in with submarines that they still had, and that provided the collateral to do this thing. He said that it was run by Brookhaven National Labs. They're going to deny it. Okay, that's fine. But that's what he said. Brookhaven ran the program. Okay? Now, what did they do? They got a hold of a seat from one of these crash retrievals, which the Pentagon and the New York Intelligencer and Luis Elizondo and all the partial disclosure folks are now saying, yep, we got crash disks. It's true. It's real. Okay. We already talked about the Roswell cube or the Orion cube. You hold it in your hands, you think about something, and you see the hologram shows you where it is. And then a wormhole opens up in front of your ship. You fly through it, and you go to that place. Now, Bruce, his real name is Bruce, or Daniel, we can call him either one. Bruce actually was hired there in 1981, and he didn't know what the hell was going on for a long time. It was very compartmentalized. So what happened was they handed him a series of waveforms, and they wanted him to build a computer that would generate the exact same sequence of waves at the same rate and frequency. And there's apparently like 200 waves. Well, eventually, he got to see that there was this big bundle about this big of fiber optic cables coming through the wall, and each of the fiber optic cables had a different one of these waves on it. Well, eventually, he was allowed to go into the room where the fiber optic cables were coming from, and they were all connected to a seat that looked very futuristic, and they told him that it came from a crashed extraterrestrial recovered disk. But that was later in the program. It turns out that all you have to do is have a person sit in the chair and then blank out their mind, and they had a whole elaborate protocol that they taught people how to do this, okay? Their name for it is the quiet point. You find the quiet point within yourself. You blank out your mind, you find the quiet point, and then they have these 22 different, 21 or 20, I think it's 22 different main baseline frequencies the chair is giving off through these fiber optic cables, and they have this series of oscilloscopes, something like an oscilloscope where you see the wave that the person's mind is generating. Once they get really internally quiet, the waves stop moving. The best guy was Duncan Cameron, and they almost always had to use Duncan. Nobody else was good enough to do it the way he did. And of course, Bruce interacted with Duncan at great length, as he did with Al Bielek, who he said told a lot of lies and false things, which is very sad. Preston Nichols was there. Anyway, once the person's mind hit quiet point, you'd have these 22 sine waves, and you'd turn these dials and you'd zero out the chair. All the sine waves now have to be flat, okay? At that point, this is where the magic happens. Once you calibrate the chair for the operator, if they think about a particular place, a portal opens up that will take you to that place. And if they think about a particular place and time, the portal will take you to that place and time, which is exactly the same function that the chair would have when it was in the UFO. It was a time machine. All UFOs are time machines by definition. If you shield gravity, you have a time machine, period. So there's some really, really cool stuff to talk about with all that. The original German secret space program was codenamed Kronos because the D.WILCOck, or the Bell, the little crafts they were making, they realized that when they used them that they were traveling through time. It becomes very obvious very quickly that you get a time slip by shielding off your gravity. So again, this sounds like it's very difficult to understand, but the physics of time travel nonetheless are true and real, and the technology works, and they've been using it for a really long time. So the plan, we're jumping way ahead now, but the plan, if you know the code name or the pro word, the plan, if you've heard me talk about that, that's the idea from the 1950s of how the mass arrests will happen and how we get our planet back. That apparently has been transmitted from our own future, where we in the military-industrial complex, we humans on Earth, however it was done, have been sending this thing back in time, the plans on how to do this, through these very, very unique quantum-correlated devices, or QCDs, as I'm choosing to call them, the QCD. We're going to get more into that. Okay, so let's get into the Bruce story. The real story is that I was at L&L Research, and I was staying there with Jim McCarty and Carla Rucker, the people who did the Law of One, okay? And I'd lived there since March of 2003, I guess, or maybe February, because there was an event called the Homecoming. No, it was earlier than that, because the Homecoming event was in January, and so I actually basically didn't leave. I did the Homecoming, I went back to Virginia Beach, I packed up all my stuff, and I moved to Louisville, Kentucky. And I moved in with Jim and Carla, and I lived there for like a year, almost 2 years. Bruce showed up in December, and that's where, and he knew that the Law of One was the only thing that he'd ever read that seemed to articulate what he had learned in these programs. So that's where he first told me that he worked at Montauk, and I literally laughed in his face. I said, Montauk is BS, and I didn't say it that way. And I laughed in his face, a big belly laugh. I worked for Preston Nichols, it's true, you can laugh if you want to, but that was real, that book is real. I said, oh, come on, man, come on. But it was only because he spent so much time talking to me about it that within about an hour of our first conversation, I'm like, wait a minute, this is way too weird, it's way too specific, he's got way too many details, and again, he's never sought publicity, he never said his real name, he never said that he was the same guy as Montauk Daniel. I mean, I guess if you really, really dug around for it, a couple people online apparently found it, his identity, but it was not anything he wanted me to talk about. He wouldn't let me photograph him. He wouldn't let me film him. And even before he died, I wanted to go out there and film him, and I was only able to get a telephone interview before he passed from cancer. And I know why he passed from cancer, because when he lived with me, he cooked Spam all the time. He fried Spam. It smelled so bad. But that's another story. He didn't really have the most healthy lifestyle. A lot of these insiders get very damaged by what they've been through. So he was working at this place, and they're handing him these graphs, and they're saying, can you build a computer that makes these wavelengths? So at first, he did it digitally, but it didn't work. And they just said, no, we're not getting the results we need. And at a certain point, what they eventually found out was that when you have a digital graph, it's always going to be like a stairwell. It goes in stair-step patterns. So you have the wave is actually going to look like this on a big level, but then on a tiny level, it's going like this. 90-degree turns, because it's either a 1 or a 0. So they brought him in, and they started to tell him some things after he'd already been figuring out what was going on, because even before that, he was in the cafeteria, and you would literally see this kind of shimmery thing. It looks like the mirage coming off of a road. And the shimmery thing is a portal. And there will be a totally different place on the other side. So one of the problems they had in the beginning with the chair is that they couldn't stabilize where the portal would appear. And so there were people that were not on a need-to-know basis, and they were in the cafeteria, and then Bruce started to notice that guys would just pick up their trays and walk over and walk away from the portal and then keep talking like nothing happened. The first way that he started to figure out what was going on is the janitor. It turns out that people were hanging out with the janitor, talking to the janitor at Montauk Point and at Brookhaven, because the two, again, were interconnected. And the janitor started to talk. So that's how Bruce originally learned what they were doing there. At some point, they brought him in and they said, we need to tell you what we're really doing because we can't figure out how to make this work. We want you to play these waves back accurately because these waves are coming out of a person's mind, and his name is Duncan Cameron, and this is how we're running a machine that opens up portals that let you go through space and time. Isn't that cool or what? Come on, I'll show you. Let's take a look. So that bundle of fiber optic cables, he got to see the other side of the room because they brought him into his room. He could touch the fiber optics and stuff while he was working. So he went into the other room, and the fiber optics went into the chair, and here's this guy, and then he sees the portal, and he sees somebody go through, and they close the door, and the portal closes, and then, time travel is happening. One of the things that the new briefings have revealed, which I didn't realize, and this is something Bruce wasn't privy to, is that very early in this process, starting in 1981, there was Phoenix 1, Phoenix 2, and Phoenix 3. So it took them a lot of work to get up to the point of getting that chair online so that it would actually function in its capacity. They needed an enormous power supply. Huge power transformers, much greater than you'd expect. Once they gave it the right power at the right frequency, which is in the Montauk books, the first two, you would have this person zero out in the chair, think about a place, and the portal opens up, and it would take you there if you send somebody through it. They were apparently rounding up people who were homeless and sending them through the portals and just see what happens, see if they come back. And most of them didn't come back. So they eventually figured out we got to build something to track them. And what they built, as the new briefings have revealed, is these spheres that were about 14 inches wide. And they're chrome and metallic. And inside the sphere are these porcelain balls that spin around and they create anti-gravity, which again, they've had all this time with these crash retrievals to figure out how that works. The balls are surveillance devices, and they're quantum correlated surveillance devices, so you can send them into the past, and they will actually send video and audio to the present. So you can send that, you can create one of these portals with the Montauk chair, send the sphere in, and have it look around, and then send somebody there when you decide that this is a good place to go. And the spheres, of course, are also invisible, and they're a little bit out of phase with matter, so you can't really touch them, okay? They also, let's talk about the quantum correlated device for a second. Time does not exist. Time is an illusion, and this becomes a very practical reality as you're studying how all this stuff works. So the way that time actually functions is that it's a flow contained in gravity, but it's not really there. Gravity is what makes it appear to be there. If you change the rate of the flow of gravity, you change the rate of time, and if you shield gravity, you go into this parallel reality where you can travel around, and as you travel through space, you're actually traveling through time. And so Bruce ended up studying this time travel thing. So here's the next thing I want to show you. This is really cool. Bruce was so amazed by the stuff that he learned when he was in this program that he ended up dedicating his entire life to studying the physics of time travel. Now, right now, I'm still at only 2 hours, so we're not going to do 5, folks, but we're definitely going to, it'll probably end up being 3, so just hang in there. But, you know, on the East Coast, you're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. It's very fascinating. So he was so amazed by this that he actually dedicated his life to studying the physics of time travel, and the best physics that he found was from a guy named Dr. Dewey Larson, and it was called reciprocal system, where he says that there is a reciprocal relationship between space and time. Now, I will be the first to admit, and I do this proudly, okay, that Bruce's understanding of physics was vastly beyond anything that I could wrap my head around. And he would say, it's a speed, it's a speed. And then he was always talking about ratios, and it's space over time, and time over space. And so basically, I mean, I don't want to try to go down the Dewey Larson rabbit hole. When I wrote Source Field Investigations or Hidden Science of Ancient Civilizations, whichever country you're in, I went into a lot of detail, and there's a lot of science, and maybe in the future I'll start unpacking that into more videos because I've never really covered it before. But what we're dealing with is that time and space are essentially two different versions of the same stuff. And the stuff, you know, in Larson's science, it's only called time. Now, the law of one says, the law of one endorsed Larson's physics because Dr. Don Elkins, who was the guy asking the questions in these sessions with an alleged extraterrestrial intelligence, that's allegedly what was talking through Carla Ruckert, he would ask these questions about Larsonian physics. So the whole book, too, is very difficult to read because it's all this physics stuff that's extremely difficult to understand. So I finally did the due diligence on that in my first book that was published and talked about the physics of time and space and how they intersect. But in the simplest possible terms, the basic idea is, how in the world could Einstein say that time is one-dimensional? There is no one-dimension anything. You're in a three-dimensional reference frame. You can't make anything one-dimensional. Anytime you're moving your finger through space, you're moving through a three-dimensional space, length, width, and height. Your planet is revolving, it's rotating on its axis, it's revolving around the sun is revolving around the center of the galaxy, right? You're always in motion. All of that motion is what creates your perception of the flow of time. If you shield that gravity, that motion no longer gives you a time reference point, and now you slip into another time frame, okay? So that's how apparently it works. In the simplest possible terms, gravity is what keeps you stuck in 3 dimensions of space with time apparently moving in only one direction. When you turn the gravity off, now you're in 3-dimensional time where you can move around and you have all these degrees of freedom. So Einstein really actually misled us by saying time is the 4th dimension. Larson said time is 3-dimensional. He has amazing physics to prove it. And as I said in my first book, he proved a whole heck of a bunch of stuff that, you know, the fine structure constant, which is how an atom jiggles when it has an electron enter or leave. He solved all kinds of astrophysics problems. He solved all kinds of quantum problems, logarithmic this and that. I mean, just it's crazy. It gets so complicated. And I'm not going to drag you through it because I don't fully understand it. I haven't actually taken the time to really dig into it. But I dug into it enough to show, yeah, this definitely looks plausible and it definitely looks true. So he studied the Larsonian physics because that was the only physics that could actually explain this weird stuff that he saw in these programs. So that's why he dedicated himself to the science of physics. So anyway, as I said, Bruce came to L&L Research in December 2003. We started to talk, and I pretty quickly realized he was telling the truth, and this was the first time that I got incredibly excited as I learned all these things I'm telling you about right now. And he insisted on an elaborate cover story. He did not want me to tell the truth about the fact that he had been there at L&L with us. He wanted me to hide that, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. You know, so we made up this story, and I do apologize, but this is how I protect confidentiality. I made up the story that you've probably heard if you watched my old videos, that I met him at a Denny's, and we actually had to target when I had physically gone to Albany, New York, and landed, so that I would have had to go to a Denny's because I did land late, and so I could prove with flight records that I went to Albany. The only thing that didn't happen is that he wasn't there, okay? But I did end up getting hungry. I did have to go to Denny's, so we had to work it out that way, and that was from his intelligence training. Now, that's not very common. I will say this, if somebody forces me to do that, to give me information, I will do it, but I always want to tell the truth, if at all possible. So typically, I don't make up a cover story. That was once kind of a one-off. Normally, what I'll just do is omit the things that people don't want you to know. But that way, we protected him, and we threw off whatever dark forces might come after him, which is very, very threatening, very real problem. And then getting back to the slide again, we actually lived together from October 2004 to January 2006. I paid for everything because he was fascinating me so much that I didn't need money. I was like, you just keep talking, and you keep telling me this stuff, and that's going to pay your way. So we actually moved in a little tiny sleepy town called Milton, Kentucky, which was only a mile and a half away from L&L Research's separate plot of land that they called Avalon. During this time, the whole period of time, I interviewed him hundreds of times about the Montauk Project. We spoke about this every day, and every evening we watched several episodes of television together. And the two main things that he wanted me to see were Stargate SG-1 and a show called Babylon 5, which, again, it's a little lame, it's a little boring, but there's a lot of stuff in there that he claimed was true. He said that the extraterrestrials in the show are wrong, they don't look like that, but that the basic, whoever this guy was that did Babylon 5, and I forget his name off the top of my head, but that he obviously knew some really strange stuff. So like the Vorlons, when they're walking around with their masks, those appear to be the Draco reptilians. A lot of really strange stuff about bases where extraterrestrials get together, politics between different races, and apparently Babylon 5 was used to allow a ton of disclosure to come through.